it's not just philosophy. It's not just great hair. It's philosophy with great hair. You know, I mean, it's everything.
Holy shit! He just came up with our tagline.
You're listening to Good is in the Details, the podcast where we learned what we didn't know in the spirit of Socrates. Hosted by myself, Dr. Gwendolyn Dolske, and the very talented, very witty LA lawyer, Rudy Salo. And this episode is a wrap-up of Season 2 with a very special guest who crashes our Zoom at the very beginning. And yeah, we do a bit of a walk down memory lane. Let us know what your favorite episode was. You can get in touch, goodisinthedetailspod@gmail.com, or on Instagram, goodisinthedetailspod. Okay, let's do a Season 2 wrap-up.
Who's Jeff?
Oh, what's going on? What's happening?
I think we just got hacked.
Did we get hacked?
And we did.
Who is that?
I have no idea.
Hey!
Is that Jeff Cortese?
Hey, sorry, my lighting is not very good in my car.
That's okay.
Did you invite him on to this?
I did.
This is hilarious.
Hey, not what I thought I was gonna get, Rudy. I'm not gonna lie.
I thought that I would invite somebody who's been on the pod a lot and who's a lot of fun to talk about our Season 2 or to pop in and say hello. He's only got a few minutes, but I thought I'd surprise you.
His timing is excellent considering he just missed the first part of that conversation. Yeah, big uh-oh, trust me.
I'm gonna have to listen later to find out, huh?
No.
No, it's not gonna be.
Definitely not getting onto.
That one didn't make it on. I got
No. You should see what we say about people before we actually hit the record button.
Oh, I've been there.
How are you, my friend? How's the book?
I'm doing well. Oh man, it is for the most part done. The heavy lifting is done.
Congratulations. That is quite the feat.
Thank you.
I'm so excited. So you're going to be on for Season 3, right? To talk about your book.
Yeah, for sure. No, absolutely.
Is a book about corruption exciting, Jeff? Or is it the fact that you are like drafting the textbook on it exciting? Tell me one of the two.
Yeah, being done is exciting.
Yes,
so
yes. Finishing is exciting.
Yeah.
No matter what the topic is.
I have no idea if it's any good. What I can tell you is
I've read parts of it. It is good.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
You know what it's not? You know what it's not? It's not exciting. It's depressing. That's not a knock on you. It's the actual topic is like, oh, this is one of the reasons why the world kind of sucks, right?
Yeah, I had different people read different parts of the book for feedback purposes and for different reasons. One of the big takeaways that I received from certain folks was, man, I never thought about it there. I never thought about corruption there. I never thought about corruption in that context or in that part of the government or, if I am lifting the curtain a little bit, then, that's a win. And that's ultimately, this is not a highbrow, overly academic perspective on corruption. It is a simple former federal agent's perspective on corruption.
And you are not offended at the fact that I smashed Gwen's excitement down because it is a topic that will open her eyes, right? No. You're not offended. I didn't offend anybody there.
He
right?
didn't. Jeff, be honest. Is this why you're calling in the dark? Is this why you're not showing your face? Or are you hiding from your 5 children?
He's Batman. He is literally, Jeff has now converted into the caped crusader against corruption. Yes.
I love how Jeff is like, I wrote a book on corruption. It might be, it's for people or like what's going on in the government. And he's calling in the dark. We can't actually.
Man, we should have had the Darth Vader voice. He should have had the Darth Vader.
Oh, that would have been great.
Because we were having technical difficulties before. It would have been perfect if you would have called in.
I think.
Collectively. The we as in good as in the details was having technical.
I know. I had this whole plan. I've been texting with Jeff. I'm like, I think this will be so much fun if you just pop in and surprise Rudy. And then Rudy, you kept pushing the time back. And then as soon as you get on, I'm like, can we get started? And you're like, my microphone doesn't work. And I'm like, oh my God.
Totally didn't work. I am so sorry. It was,
So did we make it right in time or what?
Let me say something really quick. I knew something was up because this is the first time ever Gwen's like, hey, can we just get started? I'm like, Jesus. I mean, here I am. Like, I'm trying to finally like placate and like talk for like a little while because I'm always the one that's in a rush. And so she kind of hurt my feelings for a little bit, but now I know you two are in cahoots.
We had something in the works. Well, Gwen had something in the works. Absolutely. And I'm not going to miss this. This is my favorite all-time podcast. If there's ever an opportunity to do this show, I'm never going to miss it.
Did you know, Jeff, that we are in the top 1.5% of podcasts in the world?
I did not know that.
Gwen, would you like to indulge Jeff on that statistic?
That is so crazy. I was talking to my cousin the other day, and she's working on a website for me, and she looked up the podcast on Listen Notes. I think that's the website. And she said, your podcast is in the top 1.5% globally of podcasts. And
Wow.
I was just so stunned. I mean, I'm just so humbled by that people would want to listen to us talk philosophy and, grill people about their ideas. But you know what? It's probably because Rudy has such fantastic hair.
No. I'll actually explain why. It's actually very simple. So if anybody has listened to the show, they will know that I'm a terrible mathematician. In fact, math scares me. Numbers scare me because you can't bullshit numbers. But I will apply mathematics to explain us being top 1.5% in the world. There are probably about the beginning of 2021, there are about 2 million podcasts in the world. There are probably about 3 million podcasts in the world. So technically, if you have listeners that are above like 1,000, right? That's like the threshold. You automatically get catapulted into a higher category of podcasts. And we've done well. We've picked up listeners. We're in the, I guess, let me see, how many digits are there in the thousands? There's 1 digit, 2 digit, 3 digit. There's 4 digits there. See, I can't do mathematics. So that's the explanation.
That's awesome. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're right or not. I mean, I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, I think it's just great. It's not just philosophy. It's not just great hair. It's philosophy with great hair. It's
Holy
everything.
shit, he just came up with our tagline.
It's philosophy with great hair.
No, I'm not kidding around. Jeff literally just wrote our tagline. It's not just philosophy. It's not just great hair. It's philosophy with great hair. Unbelievable. You're a marketing genius, Jeff.
Well, hey, and Jeff is part of this. So this is technically, I think, his 4th time on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
But Jeff, I wanted to tell you, I had a chance to be interviewed for another podcast. And one of the questions that the person had asked me was, what are some of your favorite or most memorable ones? And I still come back to that first one that we did, FBI agent. Yeah, because it was, to me, it's one of the best episodes because it had this beautiful flow of conversation, levity, and information. And I just am so grateful that you trusted me, you came on, and that you came on again to talk about border fraud. And it's just so beautiful. And another reason why I really like it is because I know that we probably come from different political points of view. But what I love about our conversations is that it is really demonstrating to the world that you can have lovely, fruitful dialogue where you laugh and you're friends and you learn from each other and you listen to each other. I really like that we're able to put that out there. So thank you so much for that.
I love that too. And Rudy and this show has been something I've talked about to people in my private life all the time. And it's touching on exactly what you're saying. It's a great opportunity to engage with people who come from different perspectives. But man, these are people that I love and enjoy hanging out with, and it's not personal. And Rudy, and he knows, he and I have had a lot of personal conversations with each other about different things. He challenges me in the way that I think. I hope that I challenge him in the way he thinks. And at the end of the day, I know he's good people with good intentions and goodwill. I hope he thinks the same of me. And when we all see each other that way, we better understand, hey, listen, we're all just coming from different places, and there's a lot of growth that we can gain from each other. Setting that aside, man, at the end of the day, we're just 3 high school buddies who can sit down and have a great conversation. I love it. I love it. Of all the podcasts or TV or radio or whatever it is I do, this is by far my favorite.
Great. Well, let's just say, yeah, thank you. Well, when is your, Rudy mentioned your book at the beginning. When can we expect that on the shelves? When is that going to be out?
I don't have a date as of yet. It's been turned into the publisher, being published by Routledge. 4 to 6 months is what I'm hearing. I'll be sure to let y'all know when I know more about a specific date.
Oh, that's so exciting! Congratulations.
Signed copies, perhaps, for one of our Patreons. Gwen should be able to win a signed copy.
Well, you're both gonna get one, so absolutely.
So what else is happening, my friend?
Man, not much. It's the same old. We're just fighting through this COVID thing like everybody else, and family and kids pulling us in a million different directions, and work, and just adjusting to the new normal.
Is there anything that you've taken away from this that you're not going to go back? Or do you see things not going back?
To be fair to the listeners, before Jeff answers that, Jeff was working from home prior to COVID. So he's one of those friends of mine that I actually like would reach out and like kind of get some advice about, hey, what did you do about this? Or how did you do that? He was already kind of in the working from home environment. That aside, what did COVID change, if anything?
Candidly, from my perspective, nothing's changed. If it's up to me, everything goes back to the way it was. And I understand that there are different people who have different perspectives on it, different sensitivities, different takeaways from this whole experience. At the end of the day, nothing's changing in my world, or ideally nothing would change in my world. But I'm understanding of the fact that there might be things that change, whether I want them to or not, if that makes sense. I'm not unreasonable to the sensitivities of other people, right? I'm not looking to, this is my position, this is how I feel, therefore you should submit, per se, particularly on things of health and whatnot. So, if as long as the stores tell me I got to wear a mask to go into the store, I'm going to wear a mask when I go into the store, right? If they said I didn't have to wear a mask, I probably wouldn't wear one. So, in my ideal situation is we go back to normal as quick as possible.
Does that include handshakes? Because I'm telling you, I am against them. I am against them.
And you and I have had these conversations, and I know you well enough to know that I absolutely believe that. And I think that I probably am not. I don't, handshakes don't bother me because I want to, get back to it.
Right. You're not a crazy person. You're not the person who, if you touch another person's hand, don't immediately think, how can I run to the bathroom and wash my hand as fast as possible without offending them? And that was pre-COVID.
Yeah. And I know some people are that way, and that's fine. I get it. Like I said, I'm not unreasonable toward that position. I can only speak for myself. I hope to God we never lose shaking hands. I hope to God we never lose, human intimacy, even in a friendship capacity, hugging and handshakes. And, I think we lose a lot more of each other if that's lost, I guess.
Will you feel differently if you're in a restaurant and you hear somebody at the table next to you sneeze? I feel differently when I hear that, or I had a cough and it wasn't COVID, but I had a cough and all of a sudden I was so self-conscious whenever I was out in public and I had to cough and I wanted to scream, hey, I'm vaccinated. I'm okay. It's just a cough.
I am more self-conscious about it with myself than I am about other people, because everyone else is super self-conscious about it too. So if someone coughs or sneezes, usually, they're draping themselves with something to protect everyone else. Mm-hmm. I'm more self-conscious about it with myself. In fact, I was at the store like a month ago, and I said, look at there's a couple of like at-home COVID tests. I think that's a great idea. I'll have a couple of those at home. We have a big family. Might be good to know if we've got it at some point, right? I grabbed about 2 or 3 of them, walking up to the front counter. Subconsciously, I realized, I looked down, I was hiding them.
Oh, wow.
I didn't want people to see that I was buying COVID tests because I didn't want them to think that I had COVID. It was a weird psychological event. I didn't have it. My family didn't have it. I saw it and I'm like, that might be nice to have at home. But psychologically, I was protecting the name. I was kind of hiding it while I was walking. I thought that was kind of a funny, I chuckled about that when I realized what I was doing.
Rudy just gets a basket and just dumps everything off the shelf into his basket, all the COVID tests.
In fact, they even tell me, they're like, sir, you can only buy 2 at a time. I'm like, no, come on. What do you mean 2 at a time? This is ridiculous. You have a whole stockpile of them. I need these at home. Like these, because I'm a crazy person, I need to stockpile my COVID tests. So this way I can alleviate the crazy. So by the way, you feeling subconscious, sneezing and coughing in a restaurant, and Jeff, now you feeling it. Welcome to being Rudy. You guys now know what it's like to just be in
pre-COVID
in
Rudy.
Head. Yes, pre-COVID. So you guys are crazy now too.
Jeff is getting COVID tests like it's a pregnancy test.
I was going to say, was it kind of like, if the wife asks you to get some feminine products or you have to get something kind of embarrassing, you were kind of hiding it down there? Yeah, I mean, it's the thing now.
That wouldn't have fazed me, getting feminine product, going to the store for my wife for that. That wouldn't bother me one bit, but somehow that COVID test, boy, that messed me up.
That was a good question, Gwen. Now we know what's changed, Jeff. It actually has given him a little bit of, embarrassment or humility with something. So I like that.
Oh, man.
That's pretty good.
Absolutely. There's nothing worse than having to sneeze or cough in public. Like, I just don't want any part of that. Just because I know that immediately sets off the alarm bells for people. And I get it.
Especially crazy people like myself.
Especially crazy people. But we love you anyway, Rudy. And you were crazy before COVID,
anyway.
as we've already covered. So
Yeah, it's so true. So true.
I'm curious, Jeff. I mean, I know you can't stay that long, but when you said and we're going to have you on the pod again to talk about your book, but
Sure.
I'm just wondering, when you said that maybe there were a couple parts where they were surprised of like where corruption could be, I just want a snippet. What is a place where there could be corruption? Let's just tease the book a little bit, where people might not expect it.
Yeah. I mean, how many people understand Indian country, Indian reservations?
Okay.
Or even think about that? Do you know that collectively, if you put all of Indian country in the United States, so that's the lower 48 and Alaska, if you put all of that land together, they would be the fourth largest state in the country. That's how much Indian country land exists. And a lot of people don't know that. There are a lot of people who live on Indian country. The poverty is of epic proportion compared to the rest of the country. And with that comes a certain amount of corruption. And I talk about some of the challenges with fighting corruption on Indian country, but people don't think about it. And in fact, it actually impacts a large chunk of the nation. So that might be one of them.
And Jeff, you probably have some unique insight into that, because forgive me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the FBI had some, not necessarily jurisdiction, but they had some, I mean, the way that Indian sovereignty works versus states over native tribes, like you probably have some perspective that like literally most people in the world wouldn't even have. So that's one reason why they may not think about it.
Yep. No, absolutely. It's very normal that people wouldn't think about it. It's not a criticism when I say that. It's just something that doesn't hit people's radar for the most part. And law enforcement and the law in general is a completely different animal in Indian country. So FBI agents and Bureau of Indian Affairs agents are primarily responsible for working federal violations on Indian country. Each of the tribes, they all have their own tribal police, but they can't, it's hard to broad brush it, but generally speaking, they work misdemeanor. So anything that reaches a felony, so you have a drunk driving that results in a death, an FBI agent is working that. You step outside of the reservation, an FBI agent's never going to work a drunk driving case that results in a death, right? So some of the violations are completely different. Some of them their caseload is a lot different than outside of the reservation, and their manpower is extremely limited. So the point that I get at, or one of the points I get at as it relates to Indian country, is the fact that we have so few agents working Indian country. Candidly, their violent crime, their sexual crimes are of such significance relative to their total, all the violations that they may encounter, that those take priority over corruption. Outside of the reservation, there's very little that takes priority over corruption. So on the reservation, you have child sex abuse, and you have different arson, you have life-threatening violations that take priority, thereby pushing corruption lower down the priority list. And when you are already working with extremely finite resources, it might never get addressed, is the point. So poverty with the corruption that is not being addressed to the level it should be begets more poverty, is part of the discussion in that chapter.
And that might be particularly relevant today because, as we've recently heard about the woman with the Florida boyfriend who was found murdered, and it was a national sensation, and she went missing and it was all over the news. One of the criticisms has been, hey, there have been a lot of Native American women out there that are missing. This has not gone on to the media, that no one's been paying attention to. And how come no one's talking about this? I mean, that goes straight to your point. Like, there's a fair amount of these crimes that are out, and that kind of shifts the priorities. I mean, corruption's all the way down here, and there's these really horrendous crimes that are still not even getting addressed. Is that somewhat relevant?
It is. And I actually read some of that today, some of what you're talking about. It's a weird relationship that the federal government has with Indian country. There is a desire for autonomy within Indian country. Then you add in the fact that there is a racial component, which makes the relationship even that much more delicate. Mm-hmm. A lot of the crimes that you're talking about, it would be important to first start with where those crimes being committed and who's committing them. And that will give you a good idea of where the problem lies in terms of where it needs to be addressed. Absolutely right. These women, there are horrific things that go on in Indian country. I use these words in this chapter because I absolutely believe it. I think Indian country is our dirty little secret. We sweep it under the rug. We sweep under the rug how bad it is because they want autonomy, and we're afraid to talk about what goes on there.
There's a similar issue in Canada too.
Yeah,
they
have
because I would imagine part of it is also a lack of representation. So when there's a lack of visibility, that's because if you have this separation of governments and this autonomy, then you don't have any kind of a political power or voice. And then it's also a historical context to that desire for the autonomy, but then you don't have any political representation. So then it seems like when it comes to law enforcement, this is just kind of this is the byproduct of the history and the lack of voice.
I completely agree. There are so many elements to this discussion. It cannot be reduced down to one or two things. Like you said, the history that exists, their desire for autonomy is rooted in, for good reason. They want to be autonomous. So many elements to the conversation, and I don't touch on all of that, but I do touch on, hey, there's a lot of corruption, and we're not really addressing it, and that does not help them.
So wait, I have a question. Okay, so this is a stupid question. Can I ask a stupid question? I think. Yeah. I'm just realizing that I don't know anything about this.
I've never heard you ask a stupid question. So, usually everyone always says, that's a great question. Am I actually going to, I can't wait. Now I'm waiting. Please, I'm waiting.
I'm realizing that I don't know anything about this because I thought that the reservation meant autonomy. So my question is, if you commit a crime on that land, how is that subject to federal laws if it's an autonomous area? So I didn't even realize that you could commit a crime there and then have the federal government. So I think I'm missing something here.
Again, I'm speaking in general terms because there are state-approved reservations, there are federally approved reservations. There are slightly different rules that might apply in one state from another state. In general, the tribal police can investigate. Again, it depends, but tribal courts, they have their own courts. They can only hear misdemeanors. They can't hear felonies. Those fall within federal jurisdiction. So you have to be either Bureau of Indian Affairs, FBI, or have achieved a certification, a federal certification that allows you to investigate those crimes. And again, it differs from place to place, but if you are a non-native on Indian country committing a crime, the jurisdiction is going to be different than if you are a native on native land committing a crime, or if you're a native off of the reservation committing a crime. So there's the state, there is the federal government, and there is the
local government.
Tribal police, not the local, unless you once you go into town, right?
Once you go into town, that's right.
Yep. Right. But so, you've got all these different elements. It is pretty complex. It's not a super clean, what's Longmire is actually a pretty good show. If you've ever seen Longmire, they do a pretty good job of explaining some of the challenges between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement and tribal police. But it's pretty complicated and most people don't understand it.
I'm definitely looking forward to reading this. I'm thinking, is it similar to how the military has its own courts or no?
It's still different because within the reservation, military courts can prosecute. They prosecute their own entirely. Somebody a military professional kills another military professional on a base. They can prosecute that, as I understand it, entirely within the base or within the military. That's not the case in the reservation. If somebody kills somebody on a reservation, or if there's a child exploitation, rape, something of the sort, that's going to land in the FBI or the Bureau of Indian Affairs or somebody who's certified to work there.
Okay.
That's not going to land in a tribal court. So it is
that's
different.
So interesting. I think I have a lot to more learn about the relationship between the federal government and the reservation.
It's very complex.
One movie, and Jeff, I don't know if you've seen this, and I haven't seen it in a while, but the very first time in my life, I finally understood a couple of the differences between the federal government and tribal government. Movie, I think it's called Thunderheart with Val Kilmer. Do you remember that movie where it explained about a series of murders in North or South Dakota that based on a true story in the 1970s? Pretty good. It does a pretty decent job of explaining some things. I'm not trying to offend anybody if anybody found that movie offensive in any way, shape, or form, because it wasn't a good movie or anything, but it does a pretty good job of giving like a little bit of a base of understanding, and it's actually based on a true story. So check that out.
Yeah, there are a few movies and or shows out there that give a glimpse into the relationship between law enforcement and life on the reservation. These are a proud people with a proud culture and a rich history, and it's an interesting discussion.
And so that's probably one of the reasons why, Gwen, if somebody was reading their chapter and they said to Jeff, man, I didn't even know this was going on. Oh my gosh, this is absolutely terrible, right, Jeff? Because let's be honest, you're right. A lot of this stuff is swept under the rug. Not very many Americans or anybody else in the world really thinks about the fact that here within the United States, we actually have these separate governments that are there, these separate countries. And I've done some Indian financing whereby I actually have to read the constitution of an individual tribe, and I have to read their treaties, and then I have to extrapolate certain things for financing reasons. So that's why I'm familiar with it.
Well, we're learning something we didn't know. Right? That's the whole point. That's why that's what we're doing. That's what we're about.
That's right. And that's half of a chapter. I mean, you can write a book on that relationship, and we try to keep it to the corruption itself. But you can't talk about corruption and not talk about poverty and talk about some of the other issues that they face. And there is a correlation that exists globally between, the level of corruption in a region and the poverty and violent crime and everything else that goes with it. We explore that a little bit.
I'm curious, what was your writing process?
Procrastination.
That's what every writer's progress.
Did you have like a scheduled time, like, okay, at this time every day I'm going to write, or?
Yeah, the only deadline I met was the last one. I set plenty of deadlines for myself, but I didn't meet any of them. I had an outline. Every chapter was like getting the ball rolling. The first opening paragraph of every chapter was the hardest. It was just a brain dump. I don't know. I would brain dump everything I could think of about that topic that this particular chapter was talking about. And then I would try to unscramble it all into some fashion that made sense.
I like that.
So
I think that's good advice, because I think people are hesitant to write because they're trying to self-edit too much. But I say just go for it. Just write whatever's in your head, and then you can worry about the editing.
Yeah, that's what I do. Is I throw it all down, and if I, while I'm doing it, if I'm like, oh, this would go up there, then I'll do that. But it's just a brain dump, and then I organize it into a way that hopefully made sense.
I love it. Okay, Jeff, get
back
to whatever it was that you were doing in your car in the middle of the night.
Before you hacked us.
Appreciate you guys having me come on, and congratulations, Gwen and Rudy, on another awesome season, and I cannot wait to be part of the next.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, guys.
Have
you
a
guys
good
take
night.
Care. All right, you too. Be well.
What did you think?
That was funny. I like that. That was a good one. You pulled a fast one on me. I sincerely thought I should have known something was up. Good stuff. Nice.
Good. Well, in talking about our season 2, so I went and looked at some of our top episodes.
You're the data guru. You hold the keys to everything. What's the situation?
Well, one of our top episodes is with Liz Farmer, and it was on the gig economy and the fate of cities.
Cities have already been transformed by the gig economy with Airbnb, obviously. I mean, just with the hotels, kind of the entertainment and tourism aspect of cities has already been transformed.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that stuff.
I know it's your wheelhouse. That one was really, really great. So we also have to, give a shout out to Liz Farmer.
By the way, we're going to need to get her back on for season 3 because she just announced, I don't know if you saw this on LinkedIn. She just announced that she's doing a whole newsletter, starting her own business type of thing. So we got to get her on her to promote that.
For sure. I mean, I think one of the things that I like about that episode is I like weaving in all of the things that are impacted. Let me back up. A lot of times, especially in the university system, when we talk about, Jeff just texted, thanks for having me. When in the university system, the way we say like, okay, you're majoring in this, you're majoring in that, you're majoring in this. And a lot of times students, when they're doing their general ed, they're like, why do I have to take this class? Because it has nothing to do with my major. And I think that that's a really unfortunate thing that we've kind of sold people on, to suggest if you're studying one thing that has nothing to do with anything else. I really like topics like the gig economy and the fate of cities, because we talk about the interlacing of the app technology, the economy, the way people are, legally, the way people are defined as employees. And then we're also talking about the construction of cities, and then also the housing market. All of that stuff is together. So if you understand one, then you're able to get a hold of some of those other things. But you can't just treat all of those topics like they're just different things, like you're just talking about an app or you're just talking about a city structure. So that's one of the reasons why I really like that episode. And I bet also because Liz Farmer is amazing. But that's one of the reasons why it's one of our top.
I mean, I think it's very relevant in particular today because President Biden just signed the infrastructure bill. So if anybody wants to get some kind of a understanding, like, okay, why does this matter? What's this infrastructure bill? What's this other social infrastructure bill that everybody is talking about and saying they're going to be battle over? Go listen to that episode. It'll give you a good roadmap as to why this stuff really matters. I'm so happy to hear that that's one of our top episodes because we actually called the episode Bringing Sexy Infrastructure Back. And I coined that term at a conference that's actually going on this week here in Los Angeles at CoMotion LA. I coined that about 3 or 4 years ago. And I swear to you, I'm now seeing pop-ups of like little articles or little Instagram things and little things saying sexy infrastructure this or bringing the sex back into infrastructure and all that type of stuff. I think that was me. I'm saying that was me. I'm just going to go ahead and put a pin in. Yep, that's all because of Rudy Salo.
Copyrighted for sure.
Yeah. Well, if I was smart, if I knew anything about the law and like how to like monetize things, that's what I would have done. Instead, I'm not.
Another episode that was one of our tops in season 2 is our episode with Jackson Katz. And that was the one that was on It's a Men's Issue. So we did it way back at the beginning. I think it was our second episode of season 2 where Jackson Katz had that TED Talk about violence against women. And he was saying this is actually a men's issue.
Because people shouldn't be shocked in 2013 or 2020 to hear a man say, men should challenge other men who are acting out in sexist and abusive ways towards women and girls.
I'm really glad that episode resonated with so many people. I know that this is a completely tangential issue, but one of the things I learned about podcasting from that episode was that because his TED Talk and his books and his work, and he's been on like the Today Show and stuff like that, I thought he was so far out of our orbit. And I just figured, what the hell? And I sent him an email asking if he would be on the show. And when he said yes, I just about died. So one of the things, if anyone out here who is listening wants to do a podcast or is interested in interviewing, just go for it. Do not be afraid to just go ahead and ask. And I am so glad that he took the time to be on our show. And he really was just so thoughtful. And also you should check out his TED Talk called It's a Men's Issue, Jackson Katz. And he also wrote a book called The Macho Paradox, which is really, really good. Let me ask you, from season 2, is there something that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I'd have to say 2 of my favorite episodes were I showed my vulnerabilities, which I do on pretty much every show. I show how crazy of a person I am. I really loved our To Infinity and Beyond.
That's one of the top
Tracy.
ones too.
Just loved it. And I had some of my friends that are not big podcast fans. I literally had them in the car on a road trip and I put it on there. They rolled their eyes and then they started listening to it and they're like, oh, I loved it. That was great. And then they looked at me kind of funny. They were like, you really afraid of aliens? And then that led to a whole other discussion about my fear of aliens. And then another episode that I probably think about it, not once a day, but probably every other day, is the one we did on the philosophy of grief. And I feel like I made so much personal growth and progress during that episode.
I think, Rudy, in terms of apprehension about death, if I can give some reassurance or solace, the cover art for my book is by a Japanese artist named Motoi Yamamoto. And he creates these installations that were kind of inspired by his own sister's death from cancer in her 20s. And they're installations where he makes these complex sort of grid or maze-like patterns. He makes them out of salt. Once the installation is done at a museum, he invites people to come to the museum and take the salt and throw it into the sea. And so I think if you're worried about death, Rudy, that, in some sense, we all go back to the sea, right? We all sort of, end up back where humanity started. That's a lovely vision of what ultimately our fate is, I think.
Yeah, now I want to get transferred to a computer.
Those 2 are some of my top favorites this season, mostly because I let the crazy out a little bit even more.
Yeah, that one on grief, that was with Dr. Michael Cholby. And I agree with you. That was a really great episode. And I remember thinking, how are we going to pull this off, having an episode that's on grief? Because, you and I, we like to have a bit of a levity to our episodes. There's information, there's conversation, there's learning, but we also want some levity. And I thought, I don't know how we're going to do this. But Dr. Cholby has a fantastic personality and he's just very honest. And then of course, Rudy, you're great with your fear of dying. And that episode ended up having, which I think is like the perfect trifecta, where it is the flow of conversation, the learning, and a bit of entertainment.
And we really talked philosophy on that, because sometimes, when I try to promote the show, I say, well, it is a philosophy podcast. Not every episode do we actually touch heavily on philosophy. Like, you always try to bring something in from your teachings as a philosophy professor, which I appreciate. And I try to bring in some legal component. But on that one, I think it was a trifecta. We really got into the philosophy of grief. Not only was I a participant on the show, an active participant, but I was listening and trying to apply what he was saying while we were talking. And yet I still want to transfer my body into the computer. So it was just kind of like, I just dismissed everything.
Something that stood out to me in that episode when he said grief, when he was talking about when you have a relationship with somebody and then they die, he described it as you're reorienting that relationship. And I thought that was beautiful and true. And I had never thought about it that way, because I think maybe when somebody dies, we think that that's an end to the relationship. And I had never thought about it as, no, that's not the end to the relationship. It's a change in the relationship.
And I think we touched upon it a little bit, but you could probably apply that to, without somebody dying, but like the ending of a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
The relationship has changed. And so you have to change the way that you think about that relationship, and, you have to grieve and you have to move on just as if somebody had died. And so what's my point? It's not just about death. It is about learning how to deal with the change of circumstances and moving on with your life.
Yeah. Well, I guess I want to tell our listeners, some things we have hit. I'm just so excited. So we've hit the 25,000 download mark. Thank you for all the texts, the DMs, the reviews. And I don't know, I'm just so humbled by it. I'm so excited. But we want to let people know that the best way to support the show is really to tell your friends about the show, give it a 5-star rating, share it with people, put it on Instagram, take a screenshot of your favorite episode, and then tag us on Instagram at Good Is in the Details Pod. And one of my goals for season 3 is that I would really like to get more input from our listeners and even sponsors. So you can get in touch, goodisinthedetailspod@gmail.com, if you want to advertise with us. We're also got merch now, the beanies. They're going to be coming in soon. I'll put a picture of that up on Instagram. For season 3, we've already got some great guests lined up. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about genetic engineering. We're going to be talking about dating and relationships. We have a discussion by, Michaela. She's the author of a book. I think it's called Make Work Matter. Oh, I hope I didn't butcher that. And we also have a couple more How Do You Maternity episodes that are going to be really, really moving. I think really great. I don't know. Anything that you want to say? What are some of your hopes for season 3, or some of the things that you've really appreciated about season 2?
Well, I think for season 3, some people that I would like to get onto the show. I've got another Servite buddy who works in the local government realm, and he's going to come on and talk about the housing crisis and how we really need to rethink real estate, cities, streets, infrastructure. I think it's going to be a fascinating and great and impactful show. We'll have Jeff back onto the show to get into more of the weeds of corruption. And perhaps we'll have some listeners that listen to this wrap-up episode that send in some questions about corruption that we can ask Jeff directly.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope we get some more filmmakers on the show. I'm getting more involved into film. I'm hoping to have the director of the short film that I was in, Curtain Call, that thankfully has won a bunch of awards, Mikey Nunez. He and I are working on another short film that's going to be all in Spanish. And I think we're going to have some topics about what's it really like to be a Latino filmmaker today, and why there's not enough Latino filmmakers, and what can we do about that. And I'm very excited. I love the diversity of the shows, but I love that we came up. The number one thing that I love that we came up with during season 2, Gwen, was what you did. It was our brand, which is, I still can't even repeat it. It's something about Socrates and experts.
Learning what we didn't know.
In the spirit of Socrates. I love that we came up with that and that we're applying that. And I'm hoping to hit that home even more during season 3.
Yeah. It's fun. I think, just seeing the numbers, like the downloads, and I don't know, just like all of the reviews and stuff. I'm just so glad that we did this. And I'm so thankful to you, Rudy, that, when I came to you and I said, I have an idea, I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but will you be on board? And you were like, yeah. And I am so thankful. I'm so thankful. And I'm glad that I went with my gut that in the university system, when I'm talking with my students about some of these topics, because philosophy means love of wisdom. So that's a pretty big ballpark. We talk about a lot of different things. And I see so many of my students that they are enjoying being engaged in big ideas. And so I just thought I would take a bet and see if a broader audience wouldn't like some of these ideas. I'm just so grateful that it's working, that people do like it, and that I have you who is just an awesome co-host with great hair.
I appreciate that. I was going to make a funny philosophy joke about, does philosophy really mean the love of wisdom, or does it mean answer no questions? But I guess in a way, the love of wisdom is another way of saying, well, we're not going to answer any questions. We're just going to keep studying and getting deeper down in there and keep asking questions. So it really means the same thing.
It cracks me up whenever we have a philosopher on the show and you ask a question, and every time I hear the philosopher say, I think actually Dr. Michael Cholby said, well, I'm not going to sign on the dotted line with that. Or David of Overthink podcast said, I don't know if I have an answer. And I was just like, Rudy, when you ask philosophers questions, they are just going to explain to you why it is a good question and why they don't know.
Which is really funny that I talk so much trash about philosophers because the number one dig on lawyers is the very first answer that a lawyer will and should give is, well, that depends. If A, then B. If B, then C. If C, then so it's kind of joke on my side because me as a lawyer, I always get picked on, so I could pick on you all. Big shout out to Overthink Pod coming on to our show twice.
Yeah.
I'm hoping maybe we can do some more stuff with them. Hoping we could do some more cross.
David's book is out. Yes. David's book is out. I think it was something like When Animals Dream or something along those lines, but shoot, I probably butchered another book title, but yeah. And Ellie Anderson is also just really, really great. And they've done a fantastic job. I keep saying fantastic. They've done a wonderful job with their podcast. So anyone who's listening and they're like, I want more philosophy podcasts, they make a really great team.
Absolutely. I've actually had people reach out to me about the 2 times we've had people from Overthink on this show, and they love those shows. Mm-hmm. I was slightly offended because on the very first show, I kind of kept quiet because there was 3 philosophers and you guys are all smarter than me. I was like, dude, what do you mean that's one of your favorite shows? I barely even said anything of substance.
In fact, Sartre and Beauvoir and Merleau-Ponty, right, had a journal and they wrote newspaper articles. They were interviewed on the radio all the time. And so I actually just got a grant from Pomona to tie existentialism, which I'm teaching next semester, to public philosophy. And so I'm going to be teaching my students how to podcast and do YouTube philosophy videos in the spirit of the existentialists that we're reading, because that's sort of the equivalent today, right, of the things that they were doing back in the 1940s.
Shout out to Overthink Pod. Hopefully we can get them and even more podcasts out there to come on. And thank you for having me. Thank you for putting the show together. Looking forward to season 3.
Okay. All right. We'll see you in January. Bye.